Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. This is Jack Burton, and we are actually going to be going through. So last week I just did a run through of all my NCAA men's basketball tournament for 2015 picks. I just broadcast them live last week, and decided we would come back and see just how shitty I did at picking all these. I did not do well. Let's just be honest. Some of my thoughts were incorrect. Some of them were good. But to be fair, I've got 6 of my 8 Elite 8 teams still left. But I did not pick a lot of the upsets. We'll go through a lot of them. But for the most part, let's just say I didn't do very well. Anyway, we're going to just kind of run through all those games that I picked incorrectly and picked correctly. Give my thoughts on what's going to happen in the Sweet 16, because I'm going to be a lot better picking the Sweet 16 than the 64, right? Yeah, I think it will be. So let's just go through that and we'll do it. So here we go. Oh. That's weird. Okay. So anyway, let's get going. Sorry, I'm still kind of getting used to Google Hangouts. So we're going to present this guy. So yeah, so there we go. This is my bracket as it stands. As you can see, I did not do incredibly well, but that's okay. We'll go down region by region. In the Midwest, got Kentucky and Hampton. Obviously, Kentucky's the best team in this tournament. They are in the Sweet 16. They kicked ass against Hampton, and then unfortunately, I picked Cincinnati Purdue incorrectly. Purdue was actually winning that game, and then they kind of let it get away from them, which was really disappointing. But it happens. So Cincinnati ended up winning that game. Kentucky and Cincinnati played a brutal game on Saturday. Kentucky ended up just completely destroying them, which I kind of figured they would. They won by 19? It was a 14-point game in the end, but it was like up to 19, 20 points at one point. And Kentucky just kind of let off the gas. So they won that game. The 5-12 game, West Virginia eked out a win against Buffalo. Buffalo was actually leading that game with 2 minutes to go, or at least they had a chance to win with a minute to go. Unfortunately, they couldn't pull it out. I was really kind of hoping for Bobby Hurley to pull an upset there. Not a big Bobby Hurley fan, but I watched Buffalo play earlier this year against Kentucky, and you know what? They played them pretty tough. So West Virginia got the win, although I didn't think they would. And then West Virginia actually beat Maryland. I picked Maryland Valpo correctly, so I figured Mark Turgeon's team wouldn't have that much problem with them. West Virginia, Maryland, I did not pick that game correctly either. West Virginia took out Maryland. It was a very, very close game. If Melo Trimble hadn't gotten hurt, I think this could have turned out differently, but West Virginia ended up getting the win there and moved on, and they'll get to face Kentucky on Thursday night up in Cleveland. Let's see here. So next up, we got Butler, Texas. I picked that one correctly. Rick Barnes cannot coach in the NCAA tournament. Period. End of story. Texas really needs to fire his ass. I don't know what else there is to say. He consistently underachieves with talent he's had there the last 10 years. How do you have Kevin Durant on your team and not do anything better than a Sweet 16 finish? I don't even know if he got that with Kevin Durant. That's underperforming to a T. So Butler moved on. Butler beat them. I wasn't surprised by that. Notre Dame Northeastern. Notre Dame got a win there. Wasn't pretty. Most Notre Dame games aren't. But Jerian Grant's a great player, so I didn't think he'd have any problems. Or Notre Dame would anyway. And then after that, now I figured this matchup between Butler and Notre Dame, I thought Mike Bray would show his face, and he's not a very good tournament coach either for the most part. And I figured Butler would pull the upset. It was a closer game than, or at least it was a close game for the most part, but Notre Dame ended up winning. So I can't really fault them for that. Butler made a really good effort, but unfortunately just couldn't pull it out. The bottom of the bracket here, Wichita State, Indiana. You picked that one correctly. Wichita State, I think, is a great team. Them getting a 7 seed was atrocious. I think that was a lot of seeding management by the committee to make sure that they could actually get a crowd in Omaha, because Wichita State was like the 12th ranked team in the country. They are not a 7 seed. That is complete bullshit. But anyway, they took care of business. They took out Indiana, and Tom Crean is still stuck in Indiana, and Indiana fans are still stuck with Tom Crean. So that makes me very happy. Then underneath that, the 215, Kansas took care of New Mexico State pretty easily. I wasn't surprised by that at all. But then you had Wichita State KU, and Wichita State played a fantastic game. I mean, it's a really good game. You could tell Wichita State wanted to have that game since they don't get to play KU very often, and Wichita State took KU out. So now in the Midwest, for the Sweet 16 matchup, you've got Notre Dame and Wichita State. That's an interesting game. Coaching-wise, I really like Greg Marshall for Wichita State. I think he is head and shoulders a better X and O's coach than Mike Bray is. Definitely a better game management coach. I think he doesn't have as talented a team that he did last year, but I think they get the job done against Notre Dame. Notre Dame can't play defense, Wichita State can. And Fred Van Vliet is playing out of his mind right now. So I take Wichita State over Notre Dame. And just in case I didn't say it earlier, I think Kentucky takes care of West Virginia. It'll be an ugly game, but it'll be a fast tempo game, and I think Kentucky takes care of West Virginia in that Sweet 16 matchup in the Midwest. All right, and then once that, so I do think we get a rematch of last year's best game in the tournament, Kentucky-Wichita State for the Elite Eight matchup. I think Kentucky ends up taking it all, or at least getting to the Final Four off of that game. So let's move over to the East. I'm sorry. I'm fighting a cold still, so apologies. Let's see here. So Villanova-Lafayette. I think Villanova takes it. I'm sorry. Villanova did take it over Lafayette. And then on the other side, NC State beat LSU. LSU had a 17-point lead with like 5 minutes to go, and then they missed, I think, I don't know, 15 of the last 16 shots, including like 10 free throws. You can't win that way. So because LSU couldn't hit their free throws, NC State got the win there. So that set up a really interesting third-round matchup between Villanova and NC State. And NC State actually got the upset over Villanova, which I didn't think would happen. But, I did think Villanova was the weakest 1 seed in the field, so I wasn't terribly surprised. But it did kind of screw up my bracket a little bit. So, there you go. Let's see. Next, you got the 5, Northern Iowa against Wyoming. Northern Iowa took care of business, although Wyoming put up a pretty good fight. And then you also had Louisville against UC Irvine. And Louisville did beat Mamadou Ndiaye and the rest of his Anteater squad to set up a 4-5 matchup in the round of 32. Northern Iowa had Louisville for a little while. Louisville was just too much for them defensively, and even with the 21 feet of suck, they managed to pull out the win. So that set up a Sweet 16 matchup between NC State and Louisville, and as much as I hate to say it, I think Louisville is going to get that win in that game. I just don't think NC State is consistent enough to take care of Louisville and knock Ricky P. Slick Rick out of the tournament. Moving down, 6-11 Providence Dayton. I picked this one incorrectly. Dayton kept their mojo going and made it to the round of 32, and I got a chance to take on Oklahoma, who did get the win over Albany. Oh, excuse me. Take a drink here real quick. That's a little better. Oklahoma got the win over Albany. So that'll bring up a third-round matchup between Dayton and Oklahoma. Dayton kept it kind of close, but Oklahoma just overpowered them. and got the win and moved on to the Sweet 16. Michigan State, Georgia. For one, I did not see this coming. I thought Georgia would at least get some momentum going and get past Michigan State, but Izzo happens. Tom Izzo has his team playing about as well as they have all year. They play tough, gritty defense. They rebound incredibly well, and they made it past Georgia. And then they got to play Virginia, who won their opening round game against Belmont. And then Michigan State took out Virginia, which, I'm not surprised by that. I didn't think Virginia was as good of a team as everybody said all year. I mean, they didn't really play anyway. They had a weak ACC schedule. The one time they played an elite team, Duke, they got beat. So, I mean, don't know what else you can really say there. So that sets up Michigan State and Oklahoma. That should be a pretty good game. I don't really know who to pick. That's a tough call for me. I like Oklahoma and I like Michigan State. Michigan State, I mean, Tom Izzo's obviously been there before. Lon Kruger has too, to be fair. But I don't know. I don't know if Michigan State is definitely not the more talented team in this one. I think Oklahoma takes it, but I would not be shocked to see Izzo keep that team rolling and get to the Elite Eight. And then in the Elite Eight, I think I've got Louisville and Oklahoma. And I think, as much as I hate to say it, I think Louisville can take out Oklahoma in that game, getting them to the Final Four. Although I would not be surprised to see Oklahoma emerge from that bracket at all, since obviously I had picked them before. Moving on, let's see here. We got Wisconsin and Coastal Carolina. Wisconsin took care of them pretty easily. I thought Oklahoma State would take care of Oregon. Unfortunately, they did not. So, it is what it is. Oregon almost beat Wisconsin. It was a very, very close game coming down to the final few minutes. Wisconsin just in the end overpowered them. Frank the Tank is pretty good, and Sam Decker, if he gets hot, man, he can shoot you out of the game. So it was interesting to see how that all turned out. But, I'm not surprised Wisconsin moved on to the Sweet 16 there. Moving down, Arkansas-Wofford. Arkansas took care of Wofford pretty easily. Their style just is really tough for some teams to match up with. And then what I thought would be an upset, North Carolina-Harvard, ended up being a pretty boring game. North Carolina kind of ran away with it. North Carolina beat them, and then they actually handled Arkansas in that third-round matchup. And while it was a close game, Bobby Portis just didn't really show up again, and North Carolina moved on and got a Sweet 16 matchup against Wisconsin. And that's pretty intriguing. I would not be surprised to see North Carolina take out Wisconsin, but, we'll see what happens. I sure hope that North Carolina can take them out. They're playing really well. They're playing their best basketball of the year right now. But I just don't know if it's going to be enough to stop Wisconsin. We'll see if they can keep it going. Excuse me. So down here in the 6-11, let's see. Xavier, Ole Miss, man, this bracket really messed me up. Xavier, I did not pick them. I picked Ole Miss. I thought Andy Kennedy would have that team ready to play in the tournament, and I was wrong. Xavier beat them pretty easily. And then Baylor and Georgia State. I did not see Baylor getting beat in the first round. I mean, that was a real shock to me. To be fair, I didn't think the Ryan Harrow led team in Georgia State would make it very far. Well, joke's on me. Ryan Harrow didn't play in that game, so of course they won. It set up Xavier and Georgia State, and Xavier beat Georgia State because Ryan Harrow played in that game for Georgia State. Xavier made it on to the Sweet 16. Good for them. The 7-10 matchup, VCU did not beat Ohio State. So Shaka Smart, once again, kind of there, not quite. He had that one really great run where he made it to the Final Four, but just couldn't quite do it this year. Not even close, unfortunately. So yeah, Thad Matta and his Ohio State Buckeyes made it to the third round. Arizona took care of Texas Southern, and then Arizona took care of Ohio State. Not really surprising there. Arizona is just very, very athletic, very talented. I'm not really surprised that one happened. So that sets up a Sweet 16 matchup between Xavier and Arizona. That one's, I don't know. Actually, no, I do know. Sorry. I say that a lot. But I think Arizona just dominates Xavier. Xavier does not have the horses to keep up with Arizona. Stanley Johnson and Tarczewski will just pound it in on them. And I don't think Xavier is no stranger to a physical game, just as Cincinnati. But I think Arizona can take them out pretty easily. So that sets up an Elite Eight matchup between Wisconsin and Arizona in what could be the best game of the tournament. That's going to be a really interesting style matchup. I think Arizona wants to run the ball. Wisconsin wants to slow it down and shoot threes. I think Arizona ends up winning that game, setting up a very, very intriguing Final Four matchup with Kentucky. Over on the other side of the bracket, the south side, excuse me. Let's see here. So we got Duke and Robert Morris. Duke took care of Bobby Moe, no problem. You got San Diego State and St. John's. I thought St. John's would beat San Diego State. Steve Fisher didn't have a very good year with San Diego State, but they still made it into the tournament. But in the end, Steve Fisher got it done, and then Duke took care of them in the third round and made it to the Sweet 16. Down in the 5-12, Utah beat Stephen F. Austin. And then Georgetown took care of Eastern Washington in the 4-13 matchup, which I was really surprised with. I know I picked the game, but Georgetown's always just kind of one of those teams where they just seem to get upset every year in the first round. But this year they did pretty well. And then Utah took out Georgetown in the third round to set up a Sweet 16 matchup with Duke. And Utah looks like they're playing pretty well right now. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to take out Duke. I think Duke gets past Utah pretty easily. Down on the other side, down on the other half of the bracket, SMU, UCLA. Man, I tell you what, I watched UCLA get just destroyed by Kentucky earlier in the year. I mean, they scored 7 points and a half. 7 points and a half against Kentucky. Somehow they beat SMU. I mean, go figure. So UCLA beat SMU, made it to the round of 32, and then UAB pulled the upset over third-seeded Iowa State. I did not see that at all. Iowa State was a really good team. Now, they were prone to getting cold, and that's kind of what happened. That's how UAB beat them. But yeah, that set up a third round matchup between UCLA and UAB, and UCLA got the win. So, really crappy UCLA team made the Sweet 16 because of how the bracket fell. I mean, good for Steve Lavin, Steve Alford. But man, whoa. Let's see. Then the other side of that, Iowa beat Davidson in the 7-10 matchup. I thought this game would be a lot closer than it was, but Iowa seemed to just take care of Davidson pretty easily. Davidson wasn't shooting the ball very well. And then the 2-15, Gonzaga just didn't handle North Dakota State, but they did beat them. The third round matchup between Gonzaga and Iowa was a little bit more of what I thought would happen. Gonzaga took care of them pretty easily and moved on to the Sweet 16. So now you got a Sweet 16 matchup here with Gonzaga and UCLA. Like I said, I still don't believe in this UCLA team. I think Gonzaga wins this one pretty easily between Kyle Wiltshire and Kevin Pangos and the Sabonis kid. I think they just have too much talent and too much shooting to overpower UCLA. So that sets up a Duke-Gonzaga Elite Eight matchup. And I think as much as I would love to pick Gonzaga, I think that does get Duke through since they're just going to be too athletic, and Gonzaga just won't be able to play defense against what Duke wants to do athletically. So that sets up a Final Four matchup on the other side with Oklahoma. So you got Oklahoma Duke. Uh, you know, Oklahoma Duke, that's not a sexy matchup by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Duke takes care of it. Duke is, offensively, they are a very, very good team. Defensively, they are not. So it's going to come down to can they actually get stops on Oklahoma, and I think they can. We'll see how it happens up in Indianapolis, but I think Duke does take care of Oklahoma to get the championship game, and I think they will face Kentucky in the championship game, and then we will see one of the greatest basketball games of all time as Kentucky dominates Duke and shows yes, defense does win championships. And Kentucky will take out Duke. My guess, final score, I'm going to say something like 78, what do you think? Was it 78-65? I think that's kind of what I'm going towards. I think they shut down Duke. Duke can always get hot. It happens. Somebody can go off. But I think Kentucky's size is going to be a real problem for Jahlil Okafor. I don't think he's seen anybody Willie Cauley-Stein's size that's athletic inside in all of the ACC. I mean, probably the closest one they've seen was Montrezl Harrell, and he had a problem with Montrezl Harrell. So I think Kentucky can take them out. I mean, they still have a Plumlee on their team. You're not going to win a championship with a Plumlee on your team. I'm sorry. So anyway, yeah, I think Kentucky takes it. Go Big Blue. And this gives John Calipari his second tournament title with the Cats since he's been there. So yeah, that's kind of my bracket picks. That's where we're at right now. We'll check in next week via a much shorter video before the Final Four. But if you have questions or anything, feel free to submit them in the comments. I'll read them. I'll check. If you've got any questions or anything you think I overlooked, just let me know. Also, if you want to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to. It's just youtube.com/ppc007. Or I'm also on Twitch, too, if you want to watch me play some video games. I'll probably be streaming some Resident Evil Revelations 2 later tonight. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.